We actually have to beat our competition on taste. We have to beat them on value. We have to beat them on access. And okay, now it's also healthy and it's sustainable.
Welcome back to the Fitt Insider Podcast. I'm your host, Joe Veneri. Today I'm joined by Jonathan Neman, co-founder and CEO of Sweetgreen. In this episode, we discuss the company's mission to reinvent fast food. Jonathan shares Sweetgreen's approach to making fresh, local, and healthy meals more accessible. Plus, we talk about the second-order effects of our broken food system and the prevalence of unhealthy options. Let's get into it. The Fitt Insider Podcast is brought to you by Jack Taylor, our exclusive PR partner. More than just PR, they're creative storytellers and brand builders who actually understand the health and wellness industry. To learn more, head to fitt.co/JackTaylor. That's fitt.co/JackTaylor. Hi, Jonathan. Welcome to Fitt Insider. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, excited to chat today. Obviously, I think myself and probably a lot of listeners are familiar with Sweetgreen, fans of the business. In my case, waiting for one to, pop up in Pittsburgh. So maybe we can make that happen. But so maybe don't need an introduction in terms of what it is, what you're doing, but I thought maybe it'd be helpful just to kick things off. Like, what is the state of the Sweetgreen Union? Like, anything you think of as like how you define the business at this moment, how big it is, what's kind of top of mind, and then we'll get into it from there.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, thank you again for having me. It's great to chat with you. I follow you on social, and I really appreciate the information that you're putting out into the world. Sweetgreen started in 2007. We opened our first restaurant while we were students at Georgetown in a tiny little burger shack. And we've scaled now across the country. Today, we have 220 restaurants across most major cities in the U.S. Pittsburgh, hopefully, will be on the pipeline soon. But we're in about 20 different markets across the country. We focus on really bringing farm to table food and making it accessible. So, our mission that we started out with is building healthier communities by connecting people to real food. And our way of doing that is sourcing the best quality food from partners and farmers we know and trust, making that food from scratch in our restaurants. And then, the menu itself, the food we make, salads, warm bowls. And yesterday we actually just launched a new category called protein plates, really leaning more into heartier and more protein rich foods. For us, we're really trying to be a positive force on the world and on the food system. We see so many of the ails of society today, probably similar to you, having kind of being really directed back towards the food that we eat and the food system that we have. I don't think it's directed at the individual choices that people make. It's much more a systemic issue in terms of the incentives around what food is grown and what food is subsidized, what food people have access to, what education they have, and how we can make real healthy food as exciting, cool, sexy, and craveable as fast food. And that's what, when we talk about this idea of like rewriting the future of food, that's what we want to do, is take the scale of Starbucks or McDonald's, but with a product that you actually is good for you, you feel good eating, and a company that has a really strong value system.
Yeah, it's stepping back and looking at the kind of landscape and what you're working on building. Like, it's admirable. It's something that's much needed. The kind of fast food, ultra processed food, mass produced, just throw that in the bucket of like unhealthy is ubiquitous. It's everywhere. It's convenient. It's affordable. It tastes really good. Has a lot of things going for it. When you, as the story goes, like 2007, maybe earlier, in terms of like when you came up with actual idea, started the first location. At that time, was it this big of a vision? Like, hey, we are going to be the healthy equivalent of a McDonald's, or you name the company? Or was it like, hey, we want this thing, it doesn't exist, so we're just going to build it? What was the kind of inception to this huge kind of ambitious goal that you've now undertaken?
It was halfway between the two. So when we first started, we were seniors at college. I had just gotten back from being abroad. I was living in Australia, and I was very inspired by really the food culture there, where you have all these Australian cafes now. About 20 years later, you're actually seeing many of them come to the US, where healthy eating and like healthy living was cool there. You're like a surfer and you want it to be healthy, look good, eat well, but that was part of like what the cool kids did. And then I got back and I'm like, the cool kids here aren't going to health food places at all. How can we get the cool kids and make it as exciting, delicious, and healthy to eat food that is good for you? And for us, that's why we always start with the source. Is yeah, it's healthy, but when you source great quality food, and we talk a lot about soil health as an example, it just tastes better. The flavor just pops and hits you in a really powerful way. So when we first came up with the idea, it was, let's just open one. Let's open one restaurant, see what happens. It'd be great if it was here. We thought it was going to be super easy. We're like, oh, this is how hard could it be to open a restaurant that serves salads? It was like we found the real estate. We're like, oh, we're going to go buy the kitchen equipment. We're going to go to the farmer's market. We're going to buy the food. You have to remember, we knew nothing about restaurants and had no idea how hard it was going to be. And I think what was helpful there is the naivete of not knowing what we didn't know allowed us to jump in 2 feet first. It also allowed us to take a first principles approach in terms of how we thought about designing a restaurant different than what the typical restaurant experience was designed. As soon as we started writing the business plan, so first it was just, let's just do one. But then when we were writing the business plan and like getting ready to like raise money and build, open the first one, we were learning a lot about the industry and learning about, the growth of fast casual, and also learning about the problem and the gap in the market that really existed. And so pretty quickly, as we started peeling back the onion, the layers of the onion, we're like, wow, this could be much bigger than one store. I don't think at the time I ever thought it could be thousands of stores. I think at the time we're like, oh, maybe this can be like 20, or maybe it can be 100. Today we have 220. We think it can be thousands. It's one of those things, as we grow, we bring more people into this lifestyle, but also there's a lot of tailwind for this lifestyle. There's a lot of people that are kind of realizing and getting more educated around the importance of food and their health. And so, I think these two waves will ride together. And all to say, to answer your question, is always thought it could be something bigger, but as every day goes on, we realize that maybe it can, the opportunity is even bigger than we thought.
Yeah, bigger and necessary. That piece of like it. I don't see it in some ways going any other way. That like we have to start making these choices, healthier lifestyle, more accessible, more affordable, and obviously that aligns with how you all think about it as well. It, in describing it, and I'm sure you've encountered this many times along the way. It's like Sweetgreen is like doing fast food on hard mode. It's like, what is the hardest possible way that we could figure out how to do this? Fresh ingredients made on premises, like very convenient, trying to bring the costs down. Like the whether it was along the way trying to validate the concept, raise money, now scale it. How often are you kind of even either externally or internally just looking at it and being like, man, this is so hard. Like there are so many aspects of it that is so difficult to actually make it check all those boxes.
Yeah, it's a great question, because I remember in the early years of the business, I would complain about it a lot to like just to my co-founders, because I had other friends that had businesses, like, let's say they were like a direct to consumer clothing business, and it's like, wow, they get to just like sign up on Shopify, have this great idea, and I just like sell it. It's like so easy, and you can scale pretty quickly doing it. For us, it was always, wow, it's Sweetgreen. We have to be good at so many things. We have to be good at supply chain. We have to be good at real estate, design, construction, operations, technology, hospitality, brand, marketing, creative. There's like so many different things. And if you look at the industry, most restaurants actually aren't company owned. So if you look at the fast food landscape, most of the brands you see out there are franchised restaurants. So if you look at like a McDonald's or a Taco Bell, a KFC, there's a corporate that owns the brand, but you actually have franchisees that are operating the restaurants. There are a few exceptions to this. Chipotle is an exception. Starbucks is an exception. Sweetgreen is an exception. We own 100% of all of our restaurants, which again means we own the brand and we own the operation. We were very intentional in doing that. We wanted to control the end-to-end experience and knew that we would also be innovating and evolving a lot. And it's very hard to do that if you don't fully control it. We were also very fortunate to have a lot of access to capital in order to do it, just maybe luck in terms of the time we were growing, and given where the funding environment was. And given the performance, we had awesome return on capital of the units, so that it made sense to own them. But what went from me, my biggest gripe with the business of how hard it is, has become what I love most about it. Because now that we've, you know, created that infrastructure, we've created that supply chain, the system of running this highly complex operation. The reason I love it is that is our moat. And I was saying is like, there's a reason it's hard. There's a reason only a few people have done it. But if you can, that's why it can be super, super valuable. And I think we're going to continue to push the envelope on this, whether it be on our supply chain, things like automation, and other ways to kind of bring the brand to more people.
Yeah, I think that's a great point in terms of just like what's defensible, how you continue to differentiate. The barrier to entry is massive, and obviously a lot of things went in your favor, but in terms of like the innovation and trying to stay ahead of that, really defining what this looks like, that continues to give you that kind of growth into the future. One thing that there are so many like buzzwords, right? When it comes to not just like fast food or fast casual or restaurants in general, but just like broader healthy, better for you food, local, fresh, organic, sustainable, farm to table, like farmer relationships. Like you've mentioned a couple of those to this point. Obviously, for you, they're not buzzwords, they're essential to the business. How do you think about like the role that that plays, why that's significant, and just like the way maybe it gets kind of tossed around versus actually executing that like day to day?
Yeah, it's really hard because we don't really have a very clear standard on what quality means. Local doesn't always mean good. Organic in some things means a lot, and some other products means less. And so it's a really tricky thing. They have all these restaurants say like source organic and local when possible. Well, is one possible like 1% of the time, or like 100? Is it more like 90% of the time? So the way we've approached it is this idea that transparency builds trust. So it's all about, if you go into any Sweetgreen restaurant, we have our local list there. We have our sourcing list where we show you every single thing in the restaurant. You can see every item that gets brought into the restaurant and where we buy it from and who we buy it from. And we vet each of our partners individually. One of the things that we do differently than most restaurants is we don't buy from distributors directly. We create relationships with the farmers and partners. Some are national organic partners. Some of our greens program is national organic, but then you have certain vegetables and other things that are more regional and local. And so for us, it's really about the transparency of it. And so if it's organic, we're going to tell you. If it's local, it's going to tell you. If it's, if you go online, we'll show you more about where we're using integrated pest management, where we're converting land from conventional to organic. So, these are very hard stories to tell to the masses, but we really try to make it as transparent as possible for those that want to understand, so we can build that trust. And the other thing is we're also learning. We're learning and open to evolving. And one of the things that we set out when we started the business was, as you think about restaurant, just like big picture view of restaurants, or when you look at them, most restaurants, as they get bigger, they get worse. You start, with one great restaurant, everything's awesome. And then as you scale, there's this like cutting of corners, and it's slow first. It's like, oh, nobody will notice if you change that thing, or if you change that thing, if you change that thing. And then you wake up 10 years later and it's irrecognizable from what it was. Like the stories I hear of what Taco Bell used to be and what it is today, it's just crazy. And I respect Taco Bell as a brand, but I think from like a product, it's just completely become a process system. For us, we've challenged ourselves to buck that trend. Can we, with scale, reinvest in the product and elevate the actual product quality of food, and find other ways to maintain our margins and grow the company? Things like technology. So a few examples for us is, we do prep our food from scratch in our restaurants. One way we do that, it's very hard to do it when you have so many different restaurants and managing that complexity, especially with the number of ingredients we have. One way we do it is we've built a lot of software to guide our teams. So if you're running the oven or you're, the hot prep or the cold prep in one of our restaurants, you're not guessing how much of what to make. We use a lot of technology in the back of house to forecast our sales, then tell the team members, almost like a GPS for the kitchen, what to prep when, so it makes it easier and more efficient to be able to do what we do, which, most people, just their idea is go make it in a factory, ship it to the store, pour it out of a bag. Ours is, well, let's let the stores do it, but let's create a different way. Other example on that is what we're doing with automation. Again, many customers would try to find the efficiencies offsite. We said what people value about Sweetgreen is the freshness of the food. So let's keep the prep in the restaurant, but the part that they value less is the assembly. Like, it doesn't, no one's ever told me that they care a lot about who assembles their bowl and how their bowl is assembled. So can we automate the actual assembly to create better unit economics, to have a faster experience, to have it better for my team members, and that allow us to protect our food ethos? And then the last example I'd give is, in terms of just continuing to improve, just last week we announced that we're moving all of our cooking of all, everything we cook, from all proteins to all vegetables to extra virgin olive oil. We actually, to be honest, I'm actually proud of the high olealic sunflower oil we were using, but based off a lot of feedback from customers, we're like, we can improve here. And so we listened to customers and we made the change. And it's amazing to see, people care about these sorts of things. And so we hope to continue to elevate the quality of the food and think of innovative ways to protect the food ethos as we scale.
Yeah, I think a lot of those things are huge and really interesting when you think about the trade-offs and the messaging and doing something that you think is going to have a huge impact but doesn't necessarily move the needle, and then something like the seed oil announcement, which was like, as far as I saw, like very, very excited across social media or different consumers when they did see it. So like that definitely registers as like, not an insignificant shift, but not like a huge change necessarily. That's like people are very, very into. Um, how is that decision making? Because I think of like the traceability and sharing the farmers and having them. It's like some people might kind of shrug at that and be like, "Oh well, I didn't know and I didn't necessarily care," but like that's great that they do it. Versus like chain wide, system wide automation of investing in this technology at times, to this criticism of like, oh, this fast casual restaurant is like saying they're a technology company. And so there's pushback on that, but that does move the needle in terms of your ability to like have control at scale of what's going on and standardize the whole process. So I guess the question is more along the lines of like decision making, knowing and being steadfast and like, no, we are going to invest in this. We are going to make this decision, and then having those things kind of like pay dividends.
Yeah. So I'll try to unpack that in a few ways. One of the things that I'll say is, we have you actually can see it right behind me. You can see our core values, and it's something that we wrote down very early in the company's history to help us have like a decision-making framework around how we make decisions. And you'll see the first one, which is win-win-win. Solutions where the customer, the, the team member, the company, and really like the community all win. Very easy to say, very, very, very hard to do. But like, let's unpack the oil one as an example. Like, how can you take it from a win-win-lose to a win-win-win? Win-win-lose would be, okay, our customers want it, so we're going to do it. It's better for them, but it costs us more money, and so we lose as a company. But can we use education to teach people why this is important, to get the sales lift from that and the trust we need from it, that can actually, even though it costs more, be an investment in the product that makes us more money? So using this like framework of win-win-win is something that we really try to do. The other thing I think is interesting is, as you think about restaurants and the consumer mindset around making a decision around restaurants, the way they typically make up the typical like decision make prioritization for the industry for fast food is first taste and like craveability. Second is like value. Third is accessibility. Fourth is probably health. And fifth is probably sustainability. You think about where Sweetgreen started in the early days, we probably put health first. Then, not the food wasn't craveable, but the message, right, was health, sustainable, accessible, okay, now craveable and value. As we've gone from just a few stores, from like us regional, company, just in like the major cities and on the coast, to now moving into all over the US and suburbs and really trying to go into the more mainstream consumers that may not understand these things. What we have to do is we have to create a product and experience that's actually better, where the health attribute is a secondary fact. Not that it should go away, but we actually have to beat our competition on taste. We have to beat them on value. We have to beat them on access. And okay, now it's also healthy and it's sustainable. So we're in this interesting place. And this is where you see some of the stuff we're doing with like protein plates, as an example, is we're trying to expand our consumer base, kind of target more, create more dinner business, and go from like those people that really just want to eat healthy to, for us, it's not just about healthy, it's about real food. That's what healthy means to me. It's not calorie counting or anything like that. It's unprocessed real food. And that's where we got to win on. We got to win a side by side comparison. When you put, a Sweetgreen protein plate or a burrito bowl, it's got to taste better. And then, okay, now it's healthier, it's more sustainable, all of these things. And if we do all of that, we have pricing power. And I think if we with the brand and the product attributes, we can create some pricing power to help us pay for the quality of food that we're putting into things.
Hey everyone, we'll get you back to the show in just a second. But first, I wanted to tell you about our exclusive PR partner, Jack Taylor. Honestly, this one's a no brainer. We've known the Jack Taylor team for years. They work with some of the most innovative health and wellness companies. We're talking Whoop, Athletic Greens, Hyperice, and many more. Jack Taylor has an extensive industry network, knows how to work with high growth companies, and really invests in building long term relationships. I know this firsthand because they're Fitt Insider's PR agency, so I can confidently recommend them, and I do all the time. From startups to more established brands, they go beyond pushing product to help companies truly thrive. To learn more, head to fit.co/Jack Taylor. That's fitt.co/Jack Taylor. Now back to the show. I want to talk about the price thing a little bit more, but just following this path, because you're talking about it, the brand, the restaurant design, the celebrity endorsements, marketing, now pushing into other categories, protein. And so much of this is just, like you said, like, it's just cool. Like, it's just a lifestyle and a brand. You have merch drops, right? That I'm sure are hugely popular. And it's like people can get behind that and it resonates with them. And if by way of this positioning, they come to love the product and that it's healthy and all these other things are true, as you say, like that's a huge win across the board. In a similar way that like Calm and Headspace, like they made meditation and mental health cool.
Made it cool because you had like LeBron James on doing it, and you have to tap into culture. Like it wasn't them saying, "Hey, here's a picture of a monk," an ad with a monk doing it. Go sit and go to a monastery and be silent for a month. It was, "Hey, this fits into your lifestyle, and look how it's resonating with culture."
It was like from the beginning. I don't remember if it was one of your co-founders, and I think maybe still with the company, but it was like one of the original co-founders, like design or product, like from the get, like prioritizing this in a way that you don't necessarily think about from a fast food company or fast casual, in kind of remaining and continuing to champion that and put that front and center. I'm sure that's like fun and exciting to do from your perspective, but similarly, like, are there trade-offs with that in the way that like you're spending and investing in this marketing, in the brand, in the design of restaurants, where you're like, man, it's like this the place where we should be putting that money and continuing to invest in, and how do we know that it's just like it's resonating and actually working?
Yeah, so it's funny. I remember when we first started the business, one of this line I would always tell people is, we look at the food landscape and we're trying to compete, health food. The campaigns that you've seen people have are really like, eat your vegetables. Vegetables are good for you. Don't die. Like, okay, like I don't know if that's really driving people to drive purchase for the the mainstream consumer. But look at what Coca-Cola sells. Coca-Cola sells happiness. You want to tell people to eat your vegetables? and they're selling happiness. You look at McDonald's and like the Happy Meal and what they've done to kids, and they have like ball pits and playgrounds and toys. And you want to have kids come and again just be like, eat your vegetables? That's not going to work. And so, the company's always had to bridge this gap between kind of the technical attributes of the food, right? The fact that how we source and the fact that it's better for you, and make sure that comes across for some consumers that care and know. But again, back to like the mainstream consumer just wants it because it's cool. Maybe wants it because it's cool and it tastes good. And, it's relevant on social media and those sorts of things. And so from the very beginning, we always tried to use culture as a way to build the brand. In 2011, we started a music festival, and we ran a music festival for about 7 years, 20 plus thousand people at, festival, huge acts, Kendrick Lamar, Calvin Harris, Lana Del Rey, The Weeknd, The Strokes, like just unbelievable. It ended up at the end, it ended up being a 2-day festival, food and music. Sweetgreen took over all the concessions. And so typically where you had like, we got rid of, the big thing is it was a festival without soda and processed food. It wasn't all Sweetgreen. We brought in friends that also restaurant partners and food partners that also had like quality food. But the idea was a festival with great music, just like any other one, but great food too. And great food, like meaning like real food. And it had burgers, it had beer, but like it was like microbreweries or in natural wine instead of like soda and hot dogs. And so that was one way of doing that. Later on in the company's history, it was some of those partnerships, whether it was Naomi Osaka and Devin Booker. Just right now, we did something with Renee Rapp. And so how do we got to kind of play that game. You got to play the game that Nike plays and make it really cultural relevant while still having the technical chops around the product to back it up.
Yeah, for sure. It definitely, in my mind, fits into that Nike, Calm, Equinox, Soul Cycle, like really shifting the perspective and making people want to be a part of it. And if initially they're like, I don't even know why, like this, I didn't do it, so to speak, to be healthy, but like this is cool and I want to be here, and they're getting that benefit on the back end, like that's great if you can shift culture in that way. Obviously, that like brings like to the point of, you mentioned competing with other options on taste and accessibility and like all the other things that go into that. Then it comes down to price. Like, can you compete on price? Can you then make enough margin to sustain the business? And that's the question that you all face operationally. You face like pushback from Wall Street, and just thinking about the consumer as they think about like where and how do I spend my money. Is that a question of like, hey, this will always be a little bit more expensive because it is healthier and cooler, and therefore be for a certain type of consumer? Or do you think it can be ubiquitous in the way that fast food is, from not only a price standpoint, but accessibility and so forth for everyone?
Yeah, something we thought about from the very beginning, or around, how do we make something that's truly accessible? If we want to compare ourselves to McDonald's, price is a component. I'll tell you how, kind of how we think about it. First, I'll tell you what we've deemed like the Sweetgreen master plan and how to get there. So when we started the business, it's really the master plan. We see it in four acts to this plan. Act one was build the brand and prove that we could build a supply chain, like an actual regional supply chain that can scale, and call it, this is like Sweetgreen, from like 0 to 50 stores. Like build the brand and get the product market fit and build the supply chain around it. Act two was around access. So it was, how do we build this digital connectivity to make it easier to access Sweetgreen? So that was introducing mobile pickup ordering, one of probably the first restaurant to do that in 2010. It was getting one of the early movers on delivery. It was Outpost. How do you make it as seamless and quick and easy as possible to order to get Sweetgreen? Act three, which I say we're kind of in now, is how do you take this thing that's worked on the coasts in these major cities and attack the suburbs? How do you make it an experience and a menu that works for that broader set of consumers and day parts? Act four for us is where automation comes in. And, we recently opened just a few months ago our very first automated restaurant powered by the Infinite Kitchen. And that's where we see an opportunity at scale to have some more power around pricing. I do think that, given the actual quality of the food, there will always be a premium to us. And I think it will be very hard for us to compete, like actually compete with a McDonald's on price. Um, but I think there's some larger systemic issues around what drives that. 97% of the subsidies in this country are going to four crops, and there are not crops that you're eating whole, right? There's an issue around subsidization of a lot of that food, but there's also an issue around education. Right now we do have a healthcare issue in this country, and the incentives are all out of whack. We used to spend twice as much per capita on food versus healthcare about 50 years ago. Today, we spend twice as much on healthcare than we do on food. So many of the illnesses that people have are preventable by food. And so I do think, a lot of what you're doing in educating the world, what we're trying to do, we see part of our marketing is education. So I want people to see this as something that, yes, you eat it because it's good for you, but a lot of sometimes I, think about Sweetgreen as like a consumer brand, which is a Trojan horse for a healthcare company. And so I don't want to tell people that, because that's not, who wants to go to a Sweetgreen as a healthcare company? I want it to, again, keep it cool and sexy, but there's a broader, a larger mission around that. And I think education is really gonna be a huge part of it. The other thing I'll say is, so much of it once you go, is education and access. So yes, price does matter, but a lot of people today don't even have access to this sort of food. So I think if you can educate them, you can give them access. I look at Starbucks, not just from a health perspective, but I remember when they first started, it was like, coffee, you can make coffee at home. It's a commodity good. Like, can't believe $5 for a cup of coffee, $8 for a frappuccino. And you look at it today, and Starbucks is ubiquitous everywhere. They've built the value that, yeah, it's actually like worth doing. And there's communities, every community in the country has one of those. So I do think over time we will start to change people's minds, and hopefully start to change the system to get us closer from a price perspective as well.
Yeah, there are a number of things that you're running up against and other health, wellness focused brands that really has nothing to do with, well, is this what the consumer wants and is it a price thing? And it's like, no, that everything really is stacked against us in terms of the decision making, the cost, the availability, like, and then of course the second order effects of what happens when we're all eating terribly and don't have access to these foods. And the kind of thought is like, oh, well, people don't want it. They don't want healthier options. They don't want the fresh vegetables. They only want these, really tasty, convenient options. And it's like, well, if we gave them the choice and they could, and maybe they had to pay a little bit more, like, would they? Yeah, like, yeah, probably. Or maybe it doesn't have to cost that much if we were to restructure who's getting subsidies and what that looks like.
Second order effects. I mean, that's what people don't think about and need to think more about when they think about food. There's the effect on the environment. There was a study that came out about 2 years ago. Like, the Rockefeller Foundation put out this study that talked about. I think you may have been posted about this before, around the second order effects of our food system, and they estimated the cost that is not captured is over $2 trillion. And part of that is on the environmental cost, and part of it is the health cost. All to say, like, food, which is only, food is about $1.5 trillion in the US holistically, both between grocery and restaurant. The second order effects in terms of the damages it does is bigger than the whole industry. So if we were able to take a real systematic approach on this, and we're able to change our food system, it would actually be a very, very good investment in terms of the overall health of our society. One way it's like a very simplistic way I look at Sweetgreens, in terms of designing a food company, that is this idea that I've coined, the 4 stages of food. And the 4 stages are: how do you feel before you eat it? Hopefully excited, craving it, like you want it. How do you feel during? Hopefully it's delicious, and let's just say it hits. How do you feel right after? Hopefully you're like not falling asleep. You feel energized. You feel good. And then how do you feel like 10, 20, 30 years later? And hopefully it's alive. And I think what most food companies are really good at is either the first two or the last two. So like typically health, the fast food restaurants are really good at 1 and 2, right? You see that commercial, you want that fried chicken sandwich, the sauce, all that. You're looking at it, you're like, oh my God, it looks so good. You eat it, it hits, it's like amazing. The sugar, fat, salt, brain was going crazy. But like as soon as you finish eating it, you kind of regret it. You want to like fall asleep, take a nap. And if you do that every day in 30 years, there's going to be serious consequences. On the flip side, you have these like health food companies that are really bad at 1 and not so good at 2, so like you're going to get like just like the super healthy meal. It doesn't really look appetizing. It doesn't taste amazing, but you're going to feel great after and you're going to be healthy in 20 or 30 years. And we got to figure out how to do all 4. Like if you can do all 4, that's the holy grail.
Yeah, I feel like that's huge. And I feel like a lot of people should steal that framework in terms of like what that looks like to execute. It gets it like I don't know if this is feasible, but you talking about at a high level the second order effects, the true cost of food, I think is how that report like framed it. And then just like the amount of money, if it's not subsidies, then it's lobbying, right? That goes into shifting dietary guidelines, where the money's going, tax incentives. Is it? I mean, running a business is hard enough on its own, and then you take all of the companies that kind of fall into this space that are trying to change culture and really deliver this better for you lifestyle. Does there reach a point where you know they all band together, you all band together, and say like, no, we need to lobby in the same way that these other organizations are to change what's happening at the highest levels because look, it's just not sustainable. And if we don't do that, we're just going to continue to be at a disadvantage when it does come to trying to compete with the status quo. I think about this a lot of times with, digital health companies, digital healthcare that are, fighting this battle between trying to live and survive in the traditional system while also like kind of building a different system. And it's like, which one are you in? Are we trying to recreate it from the inside out, or are we just trying to build a whole new one over here, which is super challenging, right?
Yeah, I think you're 100% spot on. I do believe capitalism generally is our best tool for improving society. So I'm a very big believer in capitalism. So let's let the free market drive it. However, I do think for us to be effective over the long term, there are perverse incentives here and lobbying on the other side and nutritional guidelines and subsidies and all of the things you've talked about that I do think us and other groups like us should and event at some point will get more involved on the policy side. It's in the best interest of the country and really the world. Like if we actually like care, like let's change our system from sick care to health care, because that's all we're right now. It's really just taking care of people once they're sick instead of starting to think about how we can prevent them from getting sick.
Yep. Say when we'll round up the round up the crew and be right there. Um, Yeah, as we get towards the end of the conversation, we obviously chatted about a ton and a lot to look forward to in terms of how you think about expansion and utilizing technology, automation, entering new markets. In terms of like either A, anything we haven't talked about, or B, like something you're super excited about that you do want to share or kind of uh, tell people to look out for. Is there anything that comes to mind in either of those areas?
I think the big thing, I'm just really excited because it's just day 3 of our protein plates. It's something we've been working on for years and developing, and it's just the beginning of a new category. So we launched 3 new plates, a new hot honey chicken plate, a chicken fajita bowl, and a miso glazed salmon bowl. And the tagline for the launch is, you don't have to be a salad person to be a Sweetgreen person. And so the idea is, can you bring that same quality and ethos to a meal that is just heartier and not lettuce based? And so we're really excited about that. We think it's going to be a big growth driver for us and the company. We've gotten awesome feedback in from our current customers and new ones. And so we're going to continue building on it with new proteins over the next year or two, continuing to add new and innovative proteins and bases to continue to build that out. But we want Sweetgreen really to move from what is today viewed as probably like a salad company, really to more real food company where, it's not just about the salads, but it's, we have an array of real food that fits your lifestyle.
That's awesome. Yeah. We'll hopefully get a chance to try that soon. Encourage folks who are listening to give it a try. Just go see you guys in person, get something to eat, try the new protein bowls, but also follow along on social, website, anywhere that you would point people besides like just going and getting food.
Yeah, check us out on Instagram at Sweetgreen. We're on TikTok, we're on Instagram, we're everywhere. And my handle on Twitter is at Johnny Nemo.
Awesome. We'll get everything linked below and really enjoy the conversation. It was so great to connect. Excited to share it with everyone.
Awesome, Joe. Thank you, man.
One more thing before you head out, help us spread the word. Take a minute to rate and review the podcast, subscribe to the YouTube channel, or share this episode with a friend. And if you like conversations like this, you'll love the Fit Insider newsletter. We send it every Tuesday. The link is in the description. Thanks again for listening. We'll see you back here next week.